gonna be in Erie wrestling, so I'll probably catch the highlights of this one afterwards. But Ravens and Steelers, old Browns against the Steelers, as some people would look at it. But that has that old bite of that old Browns-Steelers rivalry, of course. And those two teams, no strangers to each other. They don't like each other. And here they come once again, meeting in the playoffs here as Pittsburgh's going to host the Ravens. And let's talk about this one here, man. Both teams took interesting paths to become two of the three AFC North teams in the playoffs.
I know, that's really an amazing thing. I know that the Browns season didn't really end the way we wanted it to, and it was kind of disappointing. But you got to give the Browns a little bit of credit. They ended up going 7-9 in a year in which everybody else had double-digit wins and made the playoffs. And the Browns even did win a couple of division games. So it's like the cupboard isn't completely bare. But, I guess that's really little consolation when you are staying home and watching everybody else in the playoffs. This is a perfect game to hate watch if you're a Browns fan. To just, sit around Twitter and make mean comments about both teams and hope they both lose. But it's a matter of, we know what both these teams could do because they've done it to the Browns on several occasions. It's just going to be one of those games when Joe Flacco has a great game and the Ravens win, or if Ben Roethlisberger goes crazy and the Steelers win. Historically, it seems like things favor Pittsburgh because these teams have met in Pittsburgh in the playoffs 3 times in the past, and the Steelers have won every time. So historically, it seems like things seem to be going the Steelers' way. But the question is going to be about whether Le'Veon Bell will be able to play. Of course, he's had a tremendous year with over 2,000 yards combined running and passing, but he's had a knee injury, and I think a lot is going to depend on whether he can play or not.
Well, yeah, for sure, man. And as we saw, Pittsburgh, for protection, picks up former Brown Ben Tate here this week, and who knows how much he can pick up with the, I don't know, just somebody you can drop in. He's got some familiarity because of, and I think this has got to be a big part of it, playing on a team in the division all season. So you did prep work several times for the Baltimore defense. You know what I'm saying? So I think that kind of is what the thought process was on that. But that's going to be huge because, obviously you're talking about 2,300 yards from scrimmage. A huge season for him. Bell's been one of the guys that's really emerged. That's going to be absolutely huge. And being on the road, too. Baltimore has not been the road warriors that they've been at different times in the past. And they will have to not only go on the road to win this one, but if they were to advance, they'll be on the road for the whole thing as they were the last team to eke their way into the playoffs. Needed help, not only that win from the Browns, but they needed San Diego to lose to Kansas City as well. Going to be big here, man, for them, as you said, what happens at the running back position and if they can stop the other big plays that come from people like you mentioned earlier when we were talking about, Dan, when we were talking about wide receivers. My man Antonio Brown, who as much as I don't like the Steelers, I've got nothing but respect for Antonio Brown as far as a wide receiver. And that's one of those. Tell me you can't go find wide receivers outside of the first round of the draft, because there's one of the best in the game right there.
Right. Both teams have a lot of weapons like him as far as, and we saw what, toward against the Browns. But the one thing that's going to help the Ravens on defense is getting Haloti Ngata back from his suspension. So that was the last 4 games of the regular season, but now it's the playoffs. He's able to be back in there on the Ravens defense along with, C.J. Mosley and Lardarius Webb. So, the Ravens over the years, they keep, plugging in guys, and they still always have a really strong defense. I think the Steelers' defense has kind of taken a few steps back. They're not quite the dominant force they've been in the past. And a lot of times when these two teams play in the playoffs, it ends up being, a grind-them-out defensive type of battle. And even though it's, in Pittsburgh, I kind of, maybe it's just because, we saw the Ravens last week and just the way they were able to turn it on at the end and just they were going to win this game, and they do it. I think they got some good momentum from that. And again, I think the Ravens defense is a little bit stronger. So I think the Ravens are going to pull this one out on the road over the Steelers.
You and I are just on diametrically opposed places today because as much as it sickens me to say this, because I wish they'd both lose, but I'm going with the Steelers. I think the Steelers at home are going to I think Arizona's going to go on the road. I think the Steelers are going to win at home here. I do. I think they've I don't know. I think they're coming into the playoffs stronger than Baltimore. I hear you, man. I mean, Baltimore had a hard time with the Browns. And I know each week is of its own thing, and you can't look at it that way. So I'm not just trying to say, oh, well, they could hardly beat the Browns, but they didn't play like a team, unless the Browns just played that great, and maybe that is not being appreciated enough. But Baltimore didn't strike me last week against the Browns like a team playing for their playoff lives, man. I mean, I know they won, and I guess that's all that matters, is just being one win better than the other team, or 1 point better, or whatever. But I don't know. Because of that reason alone, I don't know. I like Pittsburgh. I think they're going to take care of it. Plus, as I said, Baltimore has not been anywhere near as strong going on the road as they have been. They snuck their way in, and I think the Steelers will take this one. But again, I wish neither team did. I wish this would be the first time in history that neither team advanced, and then the next team could just get a bye in the tournament. If this was pro wrestling, I'd book a double count out. I'm not gonna lie. I would totally book a schmoz finish right here, and nobody's going over. But since somebody has to win in real life, I'm gonna go with the Steelers, and you're gonna go with the Ravens. So we'll see what happens on that. By the way, what was it? The same draft. What we took, was it Massaquoi when they were busy taking Antonio Brown in the 6th round? Since
probably
who was it that the Browns drafted in 2010? Oh hell, no, was it? Oh, we took my man Carlton Mitchell in 2010. That's right. Yeah, no, we were too busy. We were too busy going after guys in the 6th round like Clifton Gathers from South Carolina and Larry Asante from Nebraska, who I don't think ever played a game for the Browns, by the way, while they were out there plucking Antonio Brown out of the 6th round of the draft. Okay, I'm done. I'm done with that. Let's move on to Sunday's games. I'm looking forward to this. I'll be able to sit down and relax and enjoy these. The first one's a good one. It's a rematch from a whitewashing earlier in the season. Bengals and the Colts, both teams different than they were in that meeting and in a different place here. Colts are going to be at home. Bengals have to go on the road. What are you looking for out of this one?
Well, I think that this really begins and ends with Andrew Luck. The amazing year that he's had with 4,761 yards, 40 touchdowns. That's more than twice as many touchdowns as Andy Dalton's thrown. 19 touchdowns for Dalton. That's not bad. He's thrown for almost 3,400 yards. But Luck has just been on a completely other plane. It's interesting the way that these two teams are. They're kind of the bridesmaids knocking on the door, as far as ever since Luck and Dalton have been in the league. They've made the playoffs every year, but they haven't made it to the AFC title game. So they're both trying to break through that glass ceiling. And Dalton has been especially bad in the playoffs. He's lost all 3 of his games, 1 touchdown and 6 picks. And overall, the Bengals have this big albatross around their neck, having not won a playoff game since 1991. And, of course, they get talked about that, and, the coach gets mad, Marvin Lewis. And so they've kind of got a lot of negative history on their side, and that's kind of tough to take that into a strong team like Indianapolis, into their building.
Yeah, for sure. Luck on another planet, as we've talked about. It's funny, you mentioned that since 91. The one article I read, it was just the first sentence makes you chuckle. Of course, nobody was going for cold cuts back then, but Boomer Esiason was the quarterback. Ickey Woods was the running back. He was just going for touchdowns, not cold cuts. Last time Cincinnati won a playoff game. So for those of you out there putting that into context, some of you have never seen those guys play. So, it's like those crazy, when you talk about all those Brown stats like that, except at least they've gotten to the dance. I again, on a total different tangent, I say that when people talk about Hoyer, they're like, well, I'm glad you could be happy with winning 8 or 9 games and going to the playoffs. I'm like, no, not happy. Get me there first. Just get me there first. And after a year or 2, I'll be right there with you. Let's move on to the next level. But you want to go from 4-12 to the Super Bowl, man. I'm just saying, man. But anyways, I'll take a couple of years of getting frustrated in the first round of the playoffs. Then we can argue about, do we have the right, and say what you want, man. Cincinnati is far from a functional organization, but the one thing they've done through all of that is keep the same coach. I mean, look at the job security Marv Lewis has had, man. And he's still, imagine that. Like I said, we're sitting here arguing about the quarterback in the middle of the season. Should we make a change because we're not winning enough games soon enough? Could you imagine the impatience here in the Cleveland market with a coach who just gets you? I mean, but I'm looking at it from the opposite. The grass is not green. I'll take that. Get me to the playoffs at most seasons, and then we'll deal with moving on to the next level. But yeah, that consistency, say what you want. That's something that they've had. The question mark is Andy Dalton the guy to get him to that next level? I don't think so at all. I don't.
You don't think well, it's hard because there's not a whole lot of people better than him. I mean, we talk about this mythical search for the great quarterback and stuff. Even a guy like Andy Dalton has played at a pretty darn good level, probably the top 12 or 14. He's in the top half of quarterbacks. But even him, you look at him and like he's not a guy that's going to get you all the way, and he certainly hasn't yet. And I think that if he were to do it this year, that would be a big surprise, because you're running into some great teams and some great quarterbacks who are above you. So even if you've got almost a top 10 quarterback, sometimes that's not even enough. And that's what really gets frustrating when you're in the position that the Browns are. And, looking at this weekend's game, the biggest problem for Dalton is he might not have A.J. Green, his main weapon, because Green's coming off a concussion. He still hasn't practiced, and he's probably, I don't think he's going to be able to be cleared to play. I mean, if it's Friday and he still hasn't practiced yet, that's not a good sign, especially coming off concussion. So, I mean, the coverage is not there. He can run the ball with Jeremy Hill. He can throw it to Mohamed Sanu and Jermaine Gresham, but that really, A.J. Green is the one guy who makes the entire defense sit up and notice, and if they don't have him, they're going to be very hard-pressed to beat the Colts.
Yeah, see, this isn't a regular injury. This is concussion, because if it's a knee or one of those, you can tape it up and you can take something for the pain and you can mask it and you can clear the guy for the game, but you're not allowed to monkey around with the concussion protocol, nor should you, but teams would if they could, if I'm being realistic about it. But he hasn't even begun to be able to get through it. Think about it. He missed a practice, worked out, and then missed. He hasn't even done a full go practice yet. I don't see any way, because usually that thing has got to be done. He's got to be able to be on the field practicing by late end of the week, because you have to get a full day of practice, and then the next day you have to be retested to see if you've got any symptoms, and then if you're clear after that, then they can start thinking about clearing you for the game. I don't think they have enough time. There's no way. I mean, don't bank me on this, but I don't see any way that A.J. Green plays, and that's going to, as you said, affect their game. You're going to have to rely, obviously, even more on the running game at that point to try to take some of the pressure off of Dalton, Gresham, Sanu, and those guys.
Right, and that's really too bad for the Bengals, because, if they did have Green and really a fully functioning, multifaceted offense, they might be able to make some inroads, because the Colts defense hasn't been all that great. In fact, they gave up, last year, they played a couple of playoff games, gave up a total of 87 points, and even this year, they've really been torched by a lot of good offenses. So they've really had a lot of situations where they put Luck in a position where he's going to have to score 40, 45 points a game, and he's done it. He's been able to rise to the occasion. But a lot of times, the defense for the Colts has been so bad that they've put the onus on Luck to win the game almost single-handedly. Of course, he's got great guys to throw to, like T.Y. Hilton. He's got a fantastic year. Reggie Wayne, who's still doing really, really well, and Cody Fleener, they're a tight end. So they've got a lot. He's got a lot of weapons, and I think that without the Bengals answering him with their passing to A.J. Green, I think the Luck and the Colts are going to pull away with a win here.
I'll tell you what, I think the Cincinnati defense is going to be the key. Not only, obviously, how you handle the Colts offense and what they do, but they were third in the league, 20 picks this season. As we know, we saw it here when the Browns played the Colts. Andrew Luck, susceptible to turnovers. He can make some silly throws. I mean, he makes beautiful throws. Trust me, he was my fantasy QB all season long, so I know all the great things that come with him. But he can make some plays that will cost you a game from time to time, too. Cincinnati's defense showed an ability to get to the ball and get those interceptions, so I think that's one place that they can hang their hat on here and attack. It's going to be very interesting. I think Cincinnati brings some fight, but I think Andy Dalton's going to 0-4 in the playoffs here on this one. I think it's going to be another first-round defeat for Cincinnati and for Marvin Lewis, and that's not even the whole I don't like the Bengals thing. I just think that the Colts are going to take care of this one and move on to the next round. Is that where you're at as well?
I think you're right. I think if either one of these teams is going to break through and challenge teams like the Broncos and the Patriots. It's going to be the Colts. I think again the Bengals just don't have enough, and it's not just Andy Dalton. They just don't have it all through to get past the Colts and break towards that elite level in the AFC.
I mean, last time these teams played, and I know it's a different team. I know Cincinnati is a better team than they were when these teams played, which was